Hello, my bookish friends. This one is The Treasure Hunters Club by Tom Ryan. Um, it's quite funny. This is my third attempt to try and record this for you because my cat is in a mood today. So that means when I start recording, he comes in and just sort of like fiddles with things, which all gets picked up on the microphone, which is not the most helpful. I'm sure he thinks he's helping. I'm sure you other people with pets can understand yeah, like how hard it is sometimes. Not hard, that's maybe like a bit dramatic, but how just how pets are sometimes. Anyway, this is the Treasure Hunters Club. So this is set in Maple Bay, Nova Scotia, which is famous for its stories of buried pirate treasure, which has fascinated locals and tourists for generations. It's also a town full of secrets. When three strangers converge on the small town, they set off a chain of events that brings long-held secrets to light and leads to murder. Very dramatic. Tom Ryan is a Canadian author, screenwriter, and producer. He also wrote the YA mystery Keep This to Yourself, which has currently been optioned to be adapted into a TV series, which is kind of cool, and the Lambda Award-winning I Hope You're Listening. This book has such lovely cover art in this edition, which is very pirate-esque and kind of a bit boys' own to me, which I really like. The story itself has 3 threads following our 3 lead characters in alternating chapters, and it's a fairly quick, light read overall. One character's chapters are in the first person, and that's Peter, who gets an invitation to come to the historic mansion in Maple Bay to meet with long estranged family. He was orphaned as a child and raised by unkind relatives, so he's very sort of curious to reconnect. The other 2 are Cass, who wrote a book, moved to New York City, and then sort of failed to follow up with a second successful book. So she's kind of feeling like a failure, and she's invited to house sit in the small town for a year and soon finds herself inspired to write about the treasure. And then finally, teenager Dandy, reeling from the recent loss of her beloved grandfather, who gets drawn into the mystery of the treasure by clues he left behind. So those last 2, Cass and Dandy, are not in first person. And then there are also some diary entries in the book scattered throughout as well. So initially, as I started reading this, I at first really enjoyed this book. I loved the historical aspect of the town, the pirate theme, sort of imagery of the place. And the whole thing reads very like a cozy mystery, but the style or tone of the writing is sort of a little bit young adult fiction, if that makes sense. Makes sense to me, but if it makes sense to you. I was ready to enjoy reading sort of Smugglers in the Cove, mysterious clues, sort of big haunted mansion. I liked the premise. I think all that stuff kind of worked. And I really liked that it was set in that Maritimes, Nova Scotia location. It's very chunky knit fishermen's sweaters and salty cold winds and boats and things. And the Bellwoods house, which sort of stands at the heart of the town, and the story is also great. I absolutely love an old house in a story. That's one of my favorite things in a book. But yeah, about maybe a third of the way in, I found myself just not enjoying it very much anymore. Peter's plotline being in first person is just unnecessary. It really doesn't add to the story, but it does really draw your attention to this character, which overly foreshadows the big twist ending. And I think for some readers, I think it means you're really going to see that twist coming, and it's not going to be like a reveal for you. The middle feels a bit slow, with the diary entries slowing down the overall plot when they're put in there. I think maybe putting that in one thing would have been good, because, it's in the past, it's already happened. So you can't really have that sort of adventure or tension or that kind of feeling. And because of that diary, early on, we know that the treasure has already been found and some of the characters know where it is. And that just felt like it kind of undercut everything that would have made this book a kind of a thriller, or even a mystery, because that sort of mystery is solved, and we're not really given other mystery elements to kind of latch onto. Cass's story in particular was a bit vacuous and dull. She's very, very shallow and silly. Like she's a real airhead to the point where I was like, this person is not believable. I think she's just poorly written, in my opinion. And her plot has a romance shoehorned in that just felt very flat and sort of didn't really go anywhere. I did wonder why this book really needed a romance plot at all. But yeah, I mean, the main thing for me, it's ridiculous that she wrote one book that sold well and moved to one of the most expensive cities in the world, thinking that she was going to be able to live off a writer's salary. That's insane. Yeah, knowing a tiny bit about publishing, how advances and royalties are paid, no one lives off being a writer. Like that's not something people can do in this day and age, really. Or not in that sense of like you write one novel a year as a sort of 20-something-year-old and are just really living off that. Like it just seemed really like, why would you make that decision? I don't know if you feel differently about that, or you have some stats or something that, you know, like some information about that you want to put in the comments, let me know, because obviously my perspective on this is from most of the writers that write about this kind of stuff usually have a teaching job and writing is a side hustle. So, you know, because they can't live off it and they're best-selling authors, right? So if you have some other information where you think Cass's character makes sense, let me know, because I would love to hear that, you know? Anyway, I also thought that, so she wrote a book. Her second book is not an immediate success. And for her to just not have any resilience and just decide that that means she's a failure and that kind of thing felt really melodramatic to me. I was like, would that be it? Would you just like, I don't think most artistic people would just give up that quickly. But not to worry, she's immediately and fortuitously given a free luxury home to live in for a year. I think I could have accepted this a bit more if she was a more well-rounded, more realistically written person. And maybe if this book as a whole was a romance or sort of a drama type book. But in an adventure or mystery, it didn't really feel realistic that she would just get handed that. Or, I don't know. I think, honestly, you could have just cut her whole plot and lost nothing from this book. She didn't quite match the overall tone for me, and she just didn't add anything. But I think the key thing here for me was that I didn't like the ending. The twist that I mentioned before, which I'm not going to spoil for you, it's just not that great. I think a better mystery as a whole with, you know, suspects and clues and maybe one main character and some kind of, you know, is it this guy or could it be that guy? You know, that kind of thing. I think that would have worked a lot better than the way this is structured. The diary means that we know the treasure has already been found, so there's no sense of urgency or tension there. And it means that sort of chunks of things are happening in the past with characters that are gone because it's an old diary. I also felt like everyone in the end was very chill about money in a way that felt so privileged to me in a book about that has like as a core theme that money is bad and makes people do bad things. The way Cass has all of her money problems resolved by just being given a rent-free luxury home to live in at the start of the book is probably a giveaway there. But in the end of the book, without sort of spoiling anything, people donate entire inheritances like really casually, and the treasure is just sort of cavalierly disposed of. I won't say where it is or why it's there or anything like that, but I did think, you know, this treasure is historical items that are several hundred years old. So they're artifacts of historical significance. They probably had valuable things to teach people about history. Its discovery could have led to something like a local museum and the whole town benefiting from like a better economy as it becomes sort of an even bigger tourist destination for like people that are interested in that stuff. It would have benefited like the entire area. And it sounded to me like this book was written by somebody who wanted to be on the bandwagon of, wealthy people are bad, money is bad, but that probably has never had to really worry about money before. And by that, I mean not really worry. Grocery prices are steadily rising, jobs are hard to come by, homelessness is on the rise, and while these characters are casually being given homes, just given homes in Nova Scotia and throwing away cash, it just felt a little bit like, why have you picked this theme when it doesn't, your characters are quite privileged. So I think to a lot of people, these characters would be wealthy. They would be considered, well off or doing well. And so them sort of the book being a bit like, money corrupts. I'm kind of like, but you guys are all wealthy. That said, I have been reading Sarah Smarsh's latest book, Bone of the Bone, which I highly recommend. And books like this, or any of Sarah Smarsh's books, other books like that, they give you a really different perspective. I'm sure Tom Ryan was just writing some entertaining fiction and not trying to spark a debate on financial planning and the widening gap between the poor and the wealthy in modern society. So I just kind of want to say that, like, that's something that bothered me in this book, but I really don't think that it's going to bother that many other people. So that's kind of a digression, I guess, but that's something that really struck me when I was reading this. But anyway, essentially, it's a light, entertaining enough read. I liked the flowing, easy to read style. I found myself zipping through this. I think its tone, being a little bit like young adult fiction, is part of that sort of ease of reading and that lightness. I think a little bit more mystery sort of style plotting, or even going the other way, a little bit more adventure, could have improved this book. But, it works fine as a cozy mystery. There's plenty of drama. I think that ending bothered me, but that doesn't mean it's going to bother other readers. So I feel like this one, for me, falls around the middle range in my estimation of books like this. It has its problems, but it's not bad. I've definitely read worse books. I've definitely read worse books that were painful to read. So if you're looking for something cozy to read, you could definitely do a lot worse than this. And reading this book, the things I didn't love about it, it's not going to stop me from reading more from this author in the future. So maybe that gives you a kind of better perspective on like what I thought of this one. Anyway, this one is for you if you're looking for something easy to get into. It's got that nice small town atmosphere. It's got like sort of a fun, interesting premise. It's a quick, cozy mystery read. And I think realistically, it's probably going to be fairly popular. But it may not be well realized or surprising enough or tense enough to satisfy some readers. But a big thank you to Simon and Schuster Canada, because they are the lovely people that sent me an ARC of this one for review. So this one, I think, has been out for a little bit now. If any of you guys have read it and you loved it, hated it, or were indifferent to it, let me know in the comments. Sometimes when I'm reading things, something will really strike me about a book and I will be like, oh, that really bugs me, And I'll sort of talk to people that have read it and they'll just sort of look at me blankly like, why did that bother you? Or like, I was not thinking that when I was reading this book, or even this kind of like, maybe you're overthinking this. So please let me know in the comments if anything I've said in this review has kind of struck you, or if you really loved or hated this one. I think some of you will have seen the twist coming in this book. So if you've read it and you did or didn't get the twist, I would really love to know if you saw it coming or not as well. And if you haven't read it, maybe my review will inspire you to go pick it up. I don't know. But thank you for watching, and I will chat to you guys in the comments. And whatever you're up to today, I hope you are cozy and having a good day.